Thanks a lot for having me, and great to be here. I'm kind of here for multiple different reasons, and I think probably because it's funny how often AI is a part of everything these days. And first of all, for the energy part, what my background is that I have been renewable energy developer for 25 years, which back at that point, it didn't look like much of an industry. It was kind of I used to call it performance art. If there was a business that was in this space, it would look sort of like this. There just wasn't really a business model. And over time, did about 10 megawatts of solar and then moved into bioenergy. And so built a company down in the Carolinas where we take about 900,000 tons a year of ag waste, and we turn that into renewable power, so 75 megawatts. So we've deployed close to a couple $100 million and 150 jobs, and that's kind of my background for energy. And so I've developed a lot of energy projects over the years, from tiny ones back in 2005 to a little bit larger and a little bit larger, until we've got a great sustainable company down there. And that's not what I'm here to talk about. So as part of that, that's a stable company now, and I live up here in New York. And about 3 years ago, I started a company called CEART, which is Climate Asset Risk Tool. And what CEART does is takes a variety of tools, data structuring, and other things that I'm going to talk about in a minute, and it really cuts down on what I think is the biggest bottleneck, and what I experienced as a developer is the biggest bottleneck. And it was not permitting, and it was not interconnection queues. Those are all things I could understand, and I could work around those timelines. It was really what I would call the fog of war that happens between right around the time you start negotiating a term sheet until you get a close on a project. And I really kind of wanted to dedicate this last phase of my career to building something that would shortcut that and to bring some speed and ease to the problem. So the first thing is, I kind of hear every now and then about, look, aren't you guys facing real headwinds in your industry? And this is some stats from the interconnection queue in the United States. So these, of course, are not all going to become projects, but somebody feels firmly enough about them, they made a deposit. And so the number of projects coming through the pipe are actually growing, and there are definitely headwinds in certain sectors, more or less, according to different fiat risk. But at the same time, there are more and more projects coming, and there's probably going to be a pretty big moment of exuberance coming in a few years when some implications are clear to what's gone on in the industry. And this is just another piece around that concept, that the amount of money being deployed and the amount of projects being built and the number of data centers being built are all going up drastically. So we've got to figure out a way to clear those bottlenecks if we're gonna be able to make any progress there. So this is the problem that I've lived for about 20 years, and which is that when you get into what I consider to be, a really intense information overload and amount of noise versus signal of a due diligence process, it gets pretty tricky. And I can tell you a lot of nightmares of the third law firm in the capital stack comes up with an amendment they need from a utility contract with a week till close, or turns out there's an easement that a railroad next to your project needs that you find out way too late, or there's a couple of neighbors have put together a Facebook page against your project. There's a lot of things like that pop up, and they don't ever pop up in the first month of your project. They pop up of your due diligence period. They pop up at the end when they can really devastate a project. My very first ag waste bio project, I went through the chute of private equity due diligence about 11 times. And I got to meet a lot of folks, and we all stayed friends even through those failed processes, which turned out to be great later, because later on we were able to do business in other ways. But there were just so many ways that those can go wrong. 2 years ago, we closed on two $70 million projects, and it just was stunning to me the same issues that still popped up late in the process and still caused problems for us. So whenever there's a problem with a lot of complexity at this point in time, everybody thinks, let's throw some AI at it. And so everybody's using AI to try to fix stuff. And what I kind of want to focus on is not so much this is why we're great as an interesting piece of the puzzle when you're using AI and what you need to think about. And so there's the problem. Here is what can happen to you when you start throwing it at AI. If you just start throwing a lot of complexity at AI, you're going to have file type problems, you're going to have hallucinations, you're going to have confidentiality problems. I read a stat the other day that's really interesting, because if you don't have a tool that's safe for your employees to use, something like 80% of them are just going to put it in AI anyway. And so you have to get ahead of that process. They're not going to ask, they're just going to get up their Gmail and they're going to throw the files up, because why wouldn't you? You need to do more work. And then, of course, hallucinations. So that's the kind of thing that happens to you if you just use AI to fix the complexity of a problem like that. So here's the solution, CERT. Now, the problem with this is not the solution. This is not our platform, because when I was using AI to make this presentation, and it was going back and forth between several folks on the team, and this slide went back and forth several times until somebody goes, wait a minute, that's not our platform. And the thing was, it looked enough like it, nobody noticed that it had just made up a whole bunch of stuff that had nothing to do with this, but it looked good enough on its surface that nobody really noticed back and forth about 3 times. And so I told our friend Claude, like, I don't know what happened here, but you have pictures of the screenshot, like fix that for me, and it threw me back this. And so this is what 2 problems you can get with AI is. One is you can get a real mess, and that's actually a good problem, because at least you know immediately it's a mess. But then the other thing is you can get something that looks or sounds decent, and that's even worse, because you think, oh man, thank God I don't have to think about that anymore, and it's actually a worse problem. And so that's the kind of thing that happens in AI. So we've worked about 3 years, and we've developed the solution, and it really focuses on just very quickly providing a work platform. Deal flow faster is my little favorite thing to say, and just to surface risks like very quickly. And we use this in a lot of different sectors. So we have a great customer who does landfill gas. We have another sector that has 300 or 400 solar projects, and there's a lot of things they do with those. And one of the main things they do is to know which projects to not move forward with. So they know literally in an hour, like, there are deep binary risks here that I need to stay away from. And then when they do decide to proceed, it provides a workflow and a roadmap to get to a close. So there are diligence lists, and there are lots of different tools. But I call it CEARTscore, and it is an acronym, but it's also a Gaelic word for trust, and so that's why I kind of really liked it. But the CEARTscore itself, when you get used to using this score, and you can have 400 projects in a dashboard and immediately sort them and get analytics between projects and know which projects you just need to stay away from, not pursue, which projects need a little more work, they're a little farther down there, and what are your 5 projects that you need to peel off and send to finance. You can get that analysis extremely quickly, but then you can also go down and you can drill down very fast and figure out what you need to do on any given project to push it forward. And there's just a million little tools in there that we certainly don't have time to look at right now. But this is kind of what our solution is. And there's a few things in here. I threw a slide in here it's really from the investment deck, actually, but I think it's interesting if you're thinking about AI, if you're thinking about how software works, and it's the moat. And really, there's a few things that you really need to have. So what we do in CEARTscore is we started with human intelligence. So we started with a lot of focus grouping of engineers and lawyers and consultants, permit engineers and others. And what are the questions you ask of a project when you're diligencing it? And so we ended up with about 800 questions of, like, these are the questions you have to ask about every aspect of the project. And so we're not throwing a project into AI, we're using agentic AI to very quickly answer the questions that would be answered by the humans. And then there's a few other things. There's a domain intel level where we certainly can't keep anyone's data, but we can take benchmarking and anonymized data. And so we know very quickly, is the pricing or the terms in this project, is it standard? If it's not standard, why is it not standard? And there's multiple other things that really make a project safer and faster and easier to diligence in our platform. So that's what we're doing, and it's been fantastic. There's kind of a pivot point coming up in some industries, like solar. There's going to be a lot of consolidation. There's going to be a lot of quick diligence that has to be done on many projects. And so we're just really enjoying, we launched about three months ago, and we did about 8 months of pilot projects before that, and we're just really enjoying watching this this sort of layer of domain intelligence build on top of itself. And that's what we're doing. We're down in FIDI, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody who needs any kind of quick site analysis. We're using it for data centers, and somebody the other day put an airport infrastructure project into it. If it's site related and there are construction contracts and permitting and those kind of variables that can mess up a project, it's really a powerful thing to use. So thank you very much.